22-year-old kid, maybe 23, beautiful Naomi Campbell laying out in front of me, like, and she rolled around in the sand at my feet with like 50 sets of eyes on me, including like all the power players of the fashion industry at the time. This is my life. This is what I get to do. This is what the gift is.
I'm Justin Jay. As a photographer, I've gotten to shoot rock stars, hip-hop moguls, world-class athletes, and some other truly extraordinary subjects. I'm fascinated by the backstories and life experiences that help shape these compelling people. The right photograph can reveal quite a lot about someone, but some stories can't be told with just a picture. Sometimes you need to sit down, listen, and dig a little deeper. This is The Plug. In the past decade, the accessibility of consumer-friendly digital cameras and iPhones has greatly reduced the barriers of entry to photography. But the true essence of a great portrait has always been shaped by the dynamic between the photographer and the subject. This vital interaction can't be bypassed or replaced with technology. Today's guest is a photographer who shot an astounding 300 album covers and has worked with nearly every prominent name in hip-hop, from Jay-Z to DMX, Eminem to Nas. He's remained steadfast in recognizing the importance of cultivating a collaborative connection with his subjects. His ability to express his creative vision, provide direction, and incorporate traditional lighting techniques and large format cameras are invaluable skills that he acquired while assisting for master photographers like Richard Avedon. The result are pictures that are evocative and possess a certain emotional depth and timelessness. His portrait of DMX dripping in crimson blood stands as one of the most iconic images ever taken of the late rapper. So how do you keep the momentum of a successful photography career going when magazines are approaching extinction and the demand for album packaging has largely been reduced to a thumbnail on a music streaming app? We'll find out as we sit down for a chat with the man behind some of the most recognizable and celebrated hip-hop photos of the past 25 years. Today, photographer, trusted collaborator, and a true fan of hip-hop, Mr. Jonathan Mannion. All right, we're live. Take a sit. Jonathan Mannion, thanks for sitting down, man. I super appreciate it.
I'm honored to be here.
It's crazy. I was reading your bio, getting ready for this, and it said you've shot over 300 album covers. That's a remarkable stat, dude. I mean, most people don't even own 300 albums. I mean, that's really incredible. Does that surprise you, like looking back at a number like that?
I think it was a little bit surprising, you know, when you really start to count them up and you're like, God, I'm at 50, 80, 100, 120, 140. And then you remember like, oh, I did do all those in Paris. I shot a bunch of artists in NTM and Oxmo Puccino. And, you know, you're just like, you're doing all the math and it's like, man, it's incredible. Like having a run with the same artist, but multiple albums is also cool. You know, it's like Nelly, 4 albums, Ludacris, 3 albums, 4 albums, Game, 5 albums. Like those kind of stats, they make the numbers kind of rise quickly. But I don't know, man. It's just, I think when you're in the moment and making the work, it kind of like those stats don't really matter. You're there for a different purpose of elevating the artist and putting out, you know, just great work into the world that's meaningful for each individual project.
You're worrying about the next one, not the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's only when you stop and look back do you realize, oh man, I covered some ground, you know? And I think only recently have I started to look back. It was always what's ahead, what's next. That was great, super happy, amplify it, but how do we move it forward? What's next?
Well, is there one that really sticks out to you that maybe isn't even your favorite photo or your best photo, but one that, let's say when you're 80 years old, you're going to look back at and be like, fuck yeah, I shot that. Like one that really like makes you proud?
You know, I guess in this moment, I would say maybe the work that I did with DMX, right? Because there's going to be no more new images of DMX made. I mean, obviously AI might change that whole thing. He might have 14 more albums drop with AI versions of him. But for the meantime, you know, and in between time, I would say probably that work because it was such connected and meaningful work that we made together. You know, it was really, he and I were born 15 days apart. There's something about being on that wavelength, you know, 1970, I'm 52 years old, him the same, just sort of like a same set of influences coming at you in real time, whether it's working through, you know, sort of different musical genres as music is released throughout the fullness of time that we've experienced, or even how music, you know, it changes how it's being consumed, photography changes, but he and I took this journey together, and obviously full team, my full team, but you know, that's probably some of the most meaningful work because there is a deeper story behind the creation of the work that we did. Not very surface level. It always goes layers deeper into his story. I mean, even, not to like blow him up, but people know about it, but, you know, like trauma that he experienced and then how we combated that with like divine protection, speaking in those terms, you know, spiritually, as well as creatively, to tell a really rich story without spoon feeding it. You know, I think that was the big reward. And looking back at that work and his life and the work that he did, I think is probably some of the most meaningful stuff because of how he impacted the people, the masses that he was speaking to, the forgotten souls that he was like, no, I'm here representing you, standing strong, praying for you, praying for myself. I'm trying to get through this as well. Like, you guys aren't forgotten. Keep going.
That covers, it's such a powerful, deep, iconic image, regardless of whether he's still with us or not. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And that just adds a whole nother level to it as well. You know?
Yeah, well, that's what photography is, marking the moment. So it's not forgotten, you know, and it's never going to be the same again.
What about, can you think of an album that you shot that was maybe the most challenging, where you, maybe not even your favorite, but one you look back, you're like, I cannot believe that I made it past those obstacles and that we actually got that shot done?
You know, there's so many stories of like saving of failure from the grasps of it to like come through. I would say there's a couple, you know, Stolly shooting in Cleveland. You know, we went for a couple of days. I know Cleveland like the back of my hand, but he knew a different Cleveland. And we just couldn't, like, you know, he was like, okay, I'm going to go with the flow and try and figure it out. And in the end, it took us to the third day of a 3-day shoot to finally get out like what was important to him with like 30 minutes of light left, slow time exposures, and just trying to like nail whatever it was that was in his mind, you know? So that was a big achievement. You know, DJ Khaled, there was a tough shoot down in Miami. We covered a lot of ground, but we lost light because, you know, clothing came down on the wrong plane and he went to pick it up from the airport. And then the guy wanted to charge overtime. So begging the guy to like, let us stay. And finally, you know, shooting his son in this hot tub on some Scarface in the corner as Khaled's underwater blowing bubbles, you know, up his son's, you know,
yeah.
But like this like extra bubble within the, you know, sort of this hot tub, you know, at, you know, the last second that we could be in this thing. So you just, I mean, it's just, it's always that way, I think, in photography.
Which have you found has been an obstacle more? A creative difference, like what happened in Cleveland, or a logistical problem where just like lights aren't working, you lose your location, like, you know, like technical stuff like that? Like, which one tends to kind of disrupt you more?
Well, look, after 30 years, I'm pretty war tested, so nothing really disrupts me. You know what I mean? There are shots that I've wanted to give to people, like Future in Magic City. There was this beautiful pink wall ahead of everybody kind of moving to this fluorescent mind space. I was like, it'd be great to put you against this wall and just what you have on, it's so tough. He's like, it's kind of pink though. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, I know, but it takes somebody like you to like boss up and be, you know. So there's shots that I wish that I had achieved. So there's always going to be creative differences. And I think I walk into a session with a plan to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I might get B and G, you know, and then the rest are like pivots. But I think when you're capable and composed and looking for inspiration in the moment and realize that the plan isn't always the plan. There's a divine plan that's in place for the day to make it a very special moment.
And you learn to be not only flexible, but also persuasive too.
Yeah, I mean, these plans come together. You know, it's like if you're in the right headspace and your heart's in the right place and you really want the best for the person in front of your lens, which is always the truth for me because I win when they win, you know, and I'm, you know, not along for the ride in that I'm not, you know, I'm actually the one driving my ship that day to give them their ideal self, you know, and I think that that's, you know, something to keep in mind. But in the moment, it's always to be of service to the vision, whether it's a vision that's a collaborative one or a vision that you bring entirely from your perspective or entirely their perspective, which, you know, sometimes those moments can be more challenging if we're speaking about that. When they have an idea of like, I wanted to try one shot where I'm hanging out the side of a car, or I'd love to do a police lineup. I'm like, oh, another one, please. Or like, I really thought it would be awesome if I could just sit in a throne. Like, oh, not another throne, man. Like, you know, there's ideas that we've definitely run through in hip hop.
Well-worn,
like, I won't shoot
territory.
another throne in hip hop. I've done my last throne shots.
So, you know, you and I met years and years ago. You were a full-time assistant at Richard Avedon. And another dear friend of mine was also a full-time assistant, Steve Wiley. You guys were working together.
Of course.
And I was fortunate enough to get to work with you guys a couple times and kind of see that world. And it was really a cherished couple of shoots.
Same. All of the shoots we have it out, like.
But, you know, I saw the Avedon show at Gagosian yesterday, and it was absolutely stunning. And, you know, to be honest,
Agreed.
I've been a little cynical lately about the state of photography and the role that photography plays in our culture and the future of what a career in photography looks like, you know, to be totally honest. And after seeing that show, it affected me in a way that I really didn't expect. And it made me really realize why I got into photography in the first place. And it made me remember the power of a still image to evoke emotion and to move people, you know? Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering what it was like for you seeing that show with the hindsight of everything you've achieved in your career and 30 years later after first starting to work for him.
Well, look, I can initially begin by saying I co-sign your exact feeling. You know, it's hard to take a really long run in anything that you do repetitively, and I don't mean that in a bad sort of, you know, way, but I think when you go through this journey, you realize things along the way. I think, you know, your path becomes your own path, and you bring the influence of, you know, for me, working for Dick Avedon, 93, 94, and then Mark Ullman, Stephen Klein, and Ben Watts, and Michael House Band, and like, you know, powerhouse people within their genres, more fashion, mine was more storytelling and hip hop. But hip hop has its own vibration. And I think going down that path in hip hop became a little looser, a little more renegade, a little rougher, a little like I found that I kept on distancing myself a little bit, not on purpose, from the Avedon mindset, which is my, you know, that first love and the first rhythm that you find of a photographer shooting tends to become absorbed into your own delivery of your own work, you know? So, but I found year after year, I was getting farther away from that mark of the kind of work that I understood his work to be, which was timeless, forever, legendary, ultimately defining, but like more fine art. Sometimes my stuff became commerce, get it done. I need 6 shots in a day. I'm going to try and give the label a bonus. And like, you're just kind of hustling and not going through the motions, because that's not fair either. But the polish and the deeper thinking human, you know, that perspective that he always brought to his work with the people that he surrounded himself with, inspiration that always came from different sources, whether the model that was in front of the lens or Dune Arbus or Norma Stevens or any of the people that he kept close, Mary Shanahan, you know, like so many names kind of like now flood back.
Had there been some distance between that point in your life and where you're at now that was kind of brought back with emotion and memory, like seeing those images?
Yeah. Just continuing. So like I found that I went far, far away, and now I'm driving the ship back the other way to realize that the work that I created is equally special in my moment in time. But now to celebrate it at a level where there's a heightened delivery, a more special, calmer way that people can absorb the work. You know, I hear a lot like, oh man, I had that poster of Aaliyah on my wall. Cool, it was $12. And I was mad that I had to spend $12 because that picture's everywhere. Like, no. This is fine art.
Yeah.
Invest in fine art. Like, you know, but the work had to age, you know, like fine wine. And I think now it's at a point where it's aging, it's there, it's time. There's nostalgia attached to it. There's moments of, really cherished moments in each of our journeys, because this music was omnipresent as people moved through New York, no matter when you kind of catch it. And worldwide, obviously hip hop has blown up, you know, significantly. So, you know, it's nice to now look back at the work and know that it's on the level of execution technically, just as Avedon's was. And that was the school of thought that I went to. So now how can I celebrate the 8x10 on a Deerdorf? Because I just wanted to, like, you know, I feel like I'm part of this family tree, and like I do bring out the 8x10, you know, for the right people. Like I'm shooting Pele, I'm pulling out the 8x10, I'm getting under it. But even some new voices like Devin Ojas, you know, like I think he would appreciate slowing down the process, not just getting a bunch of good captures in a row. Like slow it down, have a conversation, make some true arts. And I think now going backwards, looking at the work, we're mining the gold that we created in order to deliver a body of work in a way that elevates the whole perception or understanding of what photography meant to hip hop over this last 30 years, 50 years. Like the role of photographer is a really, really critical one, even though a lot of us have the same horror stories of being treated in a certain way, you know, and yet we still power through because it's meaningful work. And so, you know, to speak to you, like taking the hits, we've all taken the hits, and yet we're still here and we keep going because we understand that the still world and capturing a single moment that tells a bigger story for the artist in the moment and the album or whatever you're there to execute still has the same meaning. It's a deeper meaning now as the flood of images that come at you in any given day. How do you weed out the really special stuff, you know?
Well, I mean, it would seem at face value that, you know, you shooting hip hop artists is ultimately a real departure from the time that you spent with Dick Avedon. But, you know, we had on another really prolific music photographer recently, Danny Clinch, and he was talking about...
I heard of that guy. Yeah, he's a badass.
He is.
He's one of my good friends.
And, you know, he was talking about how much inspiration he found through portrait masters like Dick Avedon or Irving Penn, and probably even more so than traditional music photographers, you know? And so, you know, with that said, I'm wondering, you know, do you feel the same way? Or, I mean, what were some of the biggest takeaways working with Avedon that translated to shooting Jay-Z or Eminem or other hip hop artists?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest sort of element of his character that I can go back to and that I say often is his generosity. He was so generous, like with his gift to talent, with his explanation of the moment and what he wanted to achieve, even if it was after the fact, you know, but even just generous by allowing so many people to be, and he needed those people. He needed all of us around, surrounding him to make the work that he wanted to make at that level. But, you know, to allow people into his process and into his world and his, you know, sort of commanding talent and his requests of talent, or this psychological warfare that he like imposed on somebody to get a certain reaction. You know, you hear these stories of how he manipulated a moment to make it go the way that he wanted to go. It was his vision of somebody that he wanted to pull out, not who they thought they were. It was who he saw them as.
I mean, and are some of those lessons things that you've been able to execute working with hip hop artists in terms of persuading somebody to do something that they may not want to do? Or
absolutely. I mean, yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that Avedon is sort of the template, right? And seeing it intimately and seeing the work and doing, you know, an autobiography and evidence with him and hanging his show at the Whitney and talking about, you know, his full run of show that he'd had at that time, like that storytelling, man, is just, it's a priceless moment in time. It was like getting a PhD in photography. And I just applied that that, you know, as a psychology major in school and an art major that focused on painting and sculpture and everything else except for photography, I had all of those tools that I could then just dump into that one art form that I found, that I fell in love with, and then learned technically at least one way, like shooting a Hasselblad or the Rolleiflex or the Deerdorf, like, but then making it my own. Like I fell in love with the 195 land camera because there was the ability to give something to somebody and keep something for
the
yourself.
665 neg.
665 neg, man, which if there was one camera and they still made the film, that's probably all I would shoot forevermore. But I look back at that moment in time and what an incredible gift. A 22-year-old kid moves to New York City to learn photography from Richard Avedon. And it's like, oh man, I'm the smallest little tadpole in the biggest ocean. And you kind of grow into the size of the water, you know? So I knew that I loved hip hop and what was emerging as this, you know, really critical voice of the nation, of something that would actually unify people. And I think that's why hip hop has grown so much, is there's so many parallel universes that exist between Miami, Atlanta, LA, New York, Chicago, Cleveland, you know, and that brought us all together. And I just got in at a beautiful time, and this was my passion at work and what I was called to do and what I chased.
So, you know, one of my favorite Avedon pictures of all time has always been Sad Marilyn. I don't know if that's the actual title, but it's a picture of Marilyn Monroe shot in the late 1950s. She's wearing a sequin dress and her eyes are kind of averted off camera looking down, and she just looks so profoundly sad in that photo. And I don't think I've ever actually seen any of the other frames from that sitting until yesterday. And I went in, and the first thing you see when you go into the Gagosian show is this huge montage mural print of alternate frames from that sitting. And she's dancing and she's laughing and she's radiant and she looks like Marilyn Monroe. Like, it just makes me realize how powerful that picture of Sad Marilyn is because of the bold choice that he took to have that one particular moment represent the narrative. You know, I mean, with such an intentional editing of a specific moment in time, you know, and you don't get that in video. You couldn't have gotten that same emotion by filming it because there's just too much information. And it just makes you realize like the power of still imagery and the power of editing. And I'm wondering what's your relationship with editing in terms of some of the most iconic shots that we all know of you? Are they shots that you labored over to choose, or did those iconic shots just jump out right away?
Well, a couple of things I'll say. You're right in that single frame of Marilyn is the only one that's like that. And I'm sure a very caught moment, but also a very aware Dick Avedon saying, oh, that's it. That's the special one.
Yeah.
You know,
and then looking at it in
know.
hindsight of how her life ended up, like it's actually a very poignant and evocative and almost like foretelling shot, you know,
Sure.
and because of that, it's so, it could have so easily just been another picture of her laughing, but he chose that frame instead, and it's beautiful.
Yeah. But I think those are also the gifts that photographers get when they are really present in the moment and are seeking the answers. Again, that's how he might have seen her. And look, I wonder how many people who are in front of the lens that are there to emote and like be the life of the party at all times really are miserable and sad and a little lost and aloof and really wish they could be that version of themselves more. You know, like that speaks to the psychology of it. And I don't know, I always kind of want the true story. I never want somebody to not be themselves, but I do really enjoy getting the full range of emotion from somebody that is on stage in the white hot spotlight and get them to look the most magnificent they can look in that light. But there are moments of introspection or reflection and, you know, depending on the project and what's called for, like I want the full range of the story, you know, and it's always the quick sort of intro for an artist is like, look, better to have it, not need it than need it and not have it. So just go with me for a second, you know, and I think those are little things that you learn along the way to get a range of emotion of like, this feels right. I just love the light and the way it's coming in. I love you looking out the window. Like, I'm not even here. Like, let's, you know, we're creating moments, but how do you make them natural in the moment? And then there's certain moments that are just gifts where you're just responding to somebody doing something that's wild, like ODB taking off all his clothes. in front of me on set, which you can't unsee, by the way. But it's an intense moment. I mean, I remember the feeling, you know.
But it's one thing to be able to be blessed or talented enough to capture those moments. But can you think of a situation where you've had to grapple after the fact with what story you want to tell?
Yeah,
because that's just as important.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't get to the second part of your question, but yes, I think that. Look, I'm very strong-minded in what I think is the power from any photo shoot, right? I was there with my China markers, scribbling and squiggling with all my like special lines and like maniac kind of, marking system that I have to like really try and bring art directors quickly to the answer, because they have to do these things over and over. Like, yo, this is the goal. This is what I love. I love this. I love that. I drew, a title. I might do mock-ups or scribble on the thing, but I wanted people to know that this is what I love from the session. Over time, you realize that if you turn in 10 pictures, typically they're going to choose number 9 or number 10. And, it's not like good enough is good enough. And you don't, I learned along the way also to not turn in what I hated. What I believe that the artist would be upset at seeing of himself or herself on the cover. I'm taking those away. So at least it's degrees of goodness and hopefully greatness and hopefully excellence. You know what I mean? Ultimately, when it all ends up. But, there's definitely moments where you're like, that that's the shot and they choose something else. And it may or may not become iconic. It may just be another album. It may be cool. It may be not that cool, but I think that as long as you put your best work forward and choose wisely and share that, in the end, the story is going to come out. There are better frames than what you've seen in the world from my body of work, and I can't wait to share them.
Well, that's great. On that same topic, you and I, we both grew up and started from an era shooting film, definitely pre-digital and certainly before Instagram and social media. The term editing used to mean you and I, we would sit down with a loop and a grease pencil, and we would like choose selects on a contact sheet.
Yeah.
At what point did the definition of editing turn into retouching and putting filters for social media? Like, did I miss that
Probably
memo?
about 2008.
Like, was that the same time when ecstasy turned into Molly? It's so bizarre. It's just been completely redefined.
It has been redefined for sure. Look, we've had to do full edits like in real time to make the album come together. Like Gucci Mane, we had to shoot him at his house. There was only that night to turn in the album cover to make it to the deadline of Apple Music and whatever they needed. So cool. After the shoot, we went, sat down, edited the full shoot, and chose the cover in that moment that became this moment of victory of him, full flex, muscly, straight out of serving a little bit of extra time and in his house, wearing a little bracelet, a lovely adorned bracelet around his ankle. But like, the shoot, you would never know it. I mean, joyful, powerful. And in that moment, we created, an amazing moment. So the editing process can be as rich as it always was, but you have to find somebody in the right mindset with the right purpose. I really thoroughly enjoy editing. And I find that I have a good rhythm because I have a good system in place. Certainly I have a perspective on it. And I've missed certain frames. Like, how did I miss that shot? That thing is incredible. Like, why did I not see that in the moment?
Yeah.
But I think that's also wisdom and age and
slowing down. And the luxury of time too. It takes a lot of time
Sure.
and patience to mine those gems. Because,
Totally.
Getting back to Avedon, at first glance, like Sad Maryland is not the frame that would have jumped out to anybody.
To anybody. Well, it might have though, because it was the only one like it.
Yeah.
And maybe the people on the inside are like, look, that's who I know her to be. Like, that's her. Like, you got something really special there. Photographers can definitely be swayed and influenced by voices around them.
So to be honest, I think maybe I don't have the foundation or a strong enough background in art history to be the kind of person who is brought to tears in front of an oil painting of a master in a museum. It's not who I am. I've never felt something on that level. But I do know what it takes to take a photograph. And after seeing that show at the Gagosian Gallery the other day, there was definitely a handful of images that I was incredibly moved by, to say the least. And my instinct is to try and like reverse engineer, like how did he get from A to B? How did he take that? And I came up empty how you could create something so simple and elegant and beautiful, but with such like emotional depth, and I'm wondering, like, with regards to your photographs, like how important are the elements of pre-production and concept versus a sense of exploration and allowing a subject or the vibe or just the universe to kind of help drive you to the destination?
Yeah. There's many ways in which I work. Most of the time, when given the chance, I want to spend that time researching whoever it is that I'm working with. Whether that's going in the studio, listening to the full album, taking notes like a maniac, and then processing it, or talking about how they were influenced, what were their sources in making the music, and then how do I go kind of put myself in that same mindset in order to deliver something that complements it. I mean, that's the ideal way to work, is to blend the moment that they're in, put yourself in that headspace, and then deliver, And I think the great artists along the way have allowed me to do that, right? When that opportunity has been provided to me. Sometimes you walk into a situation blind and you just trust that whatever the journey is going to be for the day, as long as you're present for it, it's going to grow and you're going to manifest certain answers. And as long as you keep looking around to find, what's in the periphery, you're gonna find some amazing shots, as long as they're there to take the journey with you.
Do you find that it works the other way sometimes, that the preconceived big concept actually gets in the way, and then now you're locked into that mindset and you're missing out on that collaboration, or you're missing out on this like location that you just happen to find by accident?
Man, totally. But there's as many times that as you send like a location scout, like, yo, go find me somewhere to shoot this green car. And they come back and they found some rock quarry that looks like the moon, and you drive Trick Daddy in his green car into this like rubble, and he stands there and he just looks tough in his white suit with his hat with his scarf on. It's like, oh man, thank you. To the photo gods looking out for me, thank you. But yeah, there's definitely shots that I missed, or that I know would have been, that I would have loved to have seen come to life, that weren't able to come to life. You lost the light. Mos Def shows up 4 hours late, for the sunset shot. And he's like, oh man, sorry to jam you up. But then you pivot and you go down into the subway, and I have images that I like more than many of the images that I've ever done, because it connected with his journey on a deeper level. He's like, this was my station. Every time I had to come to the city, every time I went to a club, every time I went to school, every time I went to visit my family, like, this was the station I would come to. And we shot in that station, and some
it's personal,
Paul Smith,
and spontaneous
cool coat, like, but you just rock with it and go. So I don't think that pre-production, certainly walk in with a plan. I would suggest that. If you really want to calm yourself, I find that's calming for me. I walk in, here's what I'm going to execute. If all goes my way and all goes well, I'm going to execute the plan. And I know kind of what I want from each of the different scenarios and why I want it to tell the full story. But then ultimately, I don't want to go to Harlem. I don't feel like it. I'm a little tired. Mannion, can we just stay here? Sure. Yeah, of course. Let's go to the roof. And then you get a grit that you would have gotten in Harlem. So it's like conceptual considerations kind of come to life.
I found you have, there's
in a special way.
There's such an element of flexibility and problem solving that you have to have as a photographer.
Oh, man. But also not to get too fixated. There's some uptight photographers. Photographers are a weird breed. There are photographers who want it a certain way, or they get too bent out of shape to even execute the plan. They walk off set like, man, he showed up and he was just too cocky and I didn't want to deal with it. And I walked off set. Like, oh, really? That guy, you walk away from that guy, you don't harness that and play into it and see how big his ego is and like, let it expand, let it balloon, let it fill up the room. Like, oh, that's awesome. And then how do you humble that same individual to then say, look, I love all this that we got, man. Like, you're the fucking man. Like, can we just try one shot where it's the unexpected version. Like you must have so many dimensions because I hear it in the music. Can we take you to that space now?
Like
Will you go with me?
Pepper it with a little flattery.
Yo,
like
a
that.
little bit. Yo, but how many of us have these little sprinkles to like utilize? Yo, it's like a tool bag, you know? Like, fuck, I need a special Allen key to get into this dude's head.
Well, that's what brings to the next question. There's so many elements that a photographer can use to define his style. But a lot of those technical elements have become less important, whether it's the film that you use or the type of camera that you use or the way you process your film. Because with digital photography, like the options in post are almost just unlimited.
Endless,
They're unlimited
sure.
now.
Which I actually like about digital. Like, I don't want to give digital such a bad name, but
No.
It's just purist.
It's just interesting that the film stock that you use used to be such an element. You know, all these elements really defined who you were as a photographer.
But those are our filters. That's our filter system is the range of EPP cross process to get the really heavy, dense, chunky, blacky, blackety blacks.
But for someone who deals with people, it's how you interact, how you direct, how you communicate with those people that are really going to be at the heart of what that photo is. And if you were to distill it down, what would you say what's your main skill set that you bring to the table? Like what makes your pictures look like your pictures?
Just the brilliance that I bring to the table on any given occasion. No.
The humility.
Man, and that's me being humble, of course. You know what I mean? There is a perspective and a deep admiration for the artists that I work with. You know, even if I may not love every tune that they've ever created, there's a deep appreciation for another artist's perspective. And I think wanting to tell the real story, wanting to bring somebody to their best version of themselves, I tend to go to a place that is a thoughtful one. Again, being focused on the psychology of a sitting, whether from my schooling at Kenyon as a psych major or learning from Avedon or the other people who were influenced by Avedon, like Michael Houseband or Ben Watts, that can go to those places of reference, as we all do. The Irving Penn reference, the Peter Beard, the Luce, there's so many brilliant voices, Salgado, endless names that you could rattle off. But, I think that the perspective that I bring, which is the consistent element in my work, I'm always going to bring the fullness of myself to the moment, right? The timelessness doesn't happen because of a certain emotion or glance or hand position or whatever.
Or certainly because of the camera that you use
or the camera.
Film,
it doesn't matter.
The lighting.
It doesn't matter. The camera is so irrelevant to the moment of creation. It is the connection that you have with somebody and how well you can articulate your vision to bring forth whatever the idea is that you're trying to achieve, right? I think, obviously, there's hundreds of pictures of Rick Ross, you know what I mean? Not everyone is amazing, but there's certain ones that just elevate and kind of rise, that feels like another level of understanding about who this person is or who I understand that person to be. And I think that's always it. What is your interpretation of that person? How do you get it on film? And how do you make one frame stand for so much more than, than the multiple frames strung together or a video or whatever? How do you get in a frame?
So, I want to talk about your archive for a second. So it's funny, Instagram originally started as a photo sharing platform, and somewhere along the way, it turned into this
your portfolio
personal branding channel. It's not even a portfolio; it's like a personal branding channel.
Yeah,
and along the way, the power of photography has been diminished somehow. It's become more disposable, and not just because everybody has a phone in their pocket and everyone's a photographer and everyone's taking photos, but there isn't really magazines around anymore. And so people don't look at pictures in magazines, they look at them on screens. And even the way that we use to describe photography, we're not looking at photography, we're consuming content, and it's diminishing, it's devaluing. Mm. But you have some people in your archive, these iconic hip hop figures who are not here with us anymore, whether it's Biggie, Aaliyah, DMX, Nipsey. And it puts those pictures in a real special category. They're priceless now. It's like what they say about real estate. They're not making any more of it, Yeah. And, because of that, I'm wondering, are there any pictures that you took that maybe at the time weren't even your favorite, but with the passage of time, they've taken on a whole new significance and meaning?
I mean, you mentioned Nipsey in the last sentence. I would say that's like a really prime example. You know, this was an emerging voice in 2011 when I photographed him. Met him through Steve Lobel at a Game concert here on 23rd Street at the Gramercy, whatever theater or whatever it is, you know. And he's like, "Yo, this kid's next, man. This is Nip." I was like, "Okay, yo, Nipsey Hussle, nice to meet you, man." And you know, had a little quick moment, and then when I was out in LA, tweeted out, "Yo, Nip, I'm in LA. Yo, what's up? Let's do something." He's like, "Yo, bet, say less. Let's go." I'm like, "All right, meet me at Crenshaw and Slauson at the, you know, Slauson Donut Shop." Cool, I'm there, 5:00, cool. And like, just this moment that unfolded from wanting to create something with somebody that was a beautiful moment. I mean, the picture that I love from that is him just smiling in the middle of the street, just like laughing, you know, just life couldn't get any better in that moment. That was a real moment of joy and celebration and connection and you know, almost documenting him and this world that was really his on that corner that obviously, you know, its reputation precedes itself with all NWA references and things along the way. It was always like, wow, I'm being led into this moment. It's a special place, special moment, special way it came together. You know, that work with Nipsey Hussle now, to look back and to have dedicated myself to that moment for no reason, with no budget, just to do it and to make something beautiful, to document it. And then working with him afterwards for a Reebok show where he drew all over one of those images that we chose to put in the show. You know, I'm there to amplify him. And I'm there to like say like, "Yo, I really dig you, man. This is amazing. You gave me proper time. I want to spend more time. Let's continue to build," you know?
But I feel like, you know, as amazing as that photo is and as kind of organic as that sitting and that session might have been, I feel like there's no way that you could appreciate that photo at the time in the same way that you do now.
Absolutely. I don't think even at that moment I had really taken a deep dive into his music, but I knew he was an interesting, compelling character that I wanted to spend time with. You know what I mean? Like I'm a hip hop fan. Certainly that moment with Nip was about him, and the images that we got, you know, really, they became important afterwards because it was such a moment of joy. And I think people that knew him on the come up, you know, could look back and like, yeah, that's him, man. Like, yo, you really got him in that moment when he knew who he was already, but the world didn't get introduced to him until much later and learn about who he was on a deeper level of the work that he felt that he was here to do. That only started to come to life, and the heights that he would continue to have achieved afterwards, I think are, you know, pretty boundless. But now it's our responsibility to carry the torch.
Yeah. So, you know, it seems the photo industry's changed so dramatically in the last, you know, 15 years. Print media has collapsed. Magazines aren't really a source of income anymore. The music industry doesn't really have the need for as many album packages, or maybe any at this point. Everyone with their phone in the pocket's a photographer. Sometimes clients value the amount of social media followers you have more than
is that a thing?
More than the content of your imagery. And you know, with this in mind, I'm wondering, you know, as a photographer, as a creator, what are some of the challenges that you've had to face? Like, what are some of the ways that you've adapted to the changing landscape of what it means to make a living as a photographer?
I guess the first change is a mindset change for me, like to know how important my work is at the time that I created it and the doors that I kicked off the hinges for the next wave of creators to come through, right? So acknowledging what it is that I feel that I achieved beyond great pictures, but to really kind of like, as a category, to stand with the greats who created, you know, Danny Clinch, Jeanette Beckman, Lynn Goldsmith, you know what I mean? Like on and on. Great people that created at a very high level, a high artistic level. It wasn't just, you know, a happy snap and I was there and got a moment that's good enough. Good enough is never good enough for the ones that are seeking perfection. Keeping the mindset that what I do is special allowed me to kind of like not stay in my lane, But there is a part.
But that's hard. That's hard to do when the rest of the industry or the rest of the world isn't necessarily reinforcing that photography is special.
There are certain moments, and this is the deep part of the interview. There's certain moments where I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm done. Not because I'm done, but I might be pushed out of this industry, right? Because it is a young man's game, young woman's game. You know what I mean? It's like, this is the kids. And as music changed and moved and shifted, you know, things became different. You know, certain artists would have their own photographer that traveled with them all the time. There was less of a need for a Jonathan Mannion special album cover. You know, albums weren't that important. And I think that was an easy way for labels to start to reduce the rates that they wanted to give you as well. Like, there's no album covers. Like, nothing's really happening in that category anymore. It's only going to be this big. So why are you charging as much as you do? Like, well, because of the years of dedicated work that I've put in to bring myself up to that level. And the image is just as important. The image is equally important. The image is more important in that space, right? You have more of an opportunity to put your message out over and over through social media platforms. Like, you need more images. You need better images. You need the full story. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, it's only going to be this big on Apple Music, but like, what happens when it's a billboard? Yeah. What happens when you have a digital billboard as you drive into New York City and it's over on your left? Are you going to look like crap or are you going to look amazing? You know, like, you still get that same opportunity to make an impression, you know, and some people just pivoted and they went off of that idea. And some people were like, you know what? It is important. Yo, we're still going to hire you. We're going to do our day-to-day with this guy when it's album time. And when we really have to make a campaign, an ad campaign, we need somebody that's going to execute the plan.
Yeah. We talked with Danny Clinch about how he's in a unique position because he has a really valuable archive that he can, I guess syndication's not so much a thing anymore, but definitely like print sales are. And that's kind of allowed him to probably stay in the game where other people have not been able to, especially with fashion. There's no resale for a beautiful fashion photo as opposed to an iconic photo of Tupac or whatever, you know.
Sure.
Like, have you been able to leverage your archive in that sense?
You know, Morrison Hotel Gallery, I've been with them for a number of years. You know, that's been a great relationship to have, to share a new sort of body of work with collectors, right? As people are like, man, I love the Doors or Zeppelin or, you know, sort of Stevie Wonder or whatever that they have in their archive now. But now it's sort of like, hey, but my son loves the Beastie Boys. So do you have any Beastie Boys? I want to start collecting an emerging body of work, right? So, you know, I think the people that are like really getting behind collecting and moving into that space where maybe they have enough money to collect, or they want to start to relive 30 years ago, 20 years ago, or artists that they loved when they were just coming up. Like, again, it has to age, it has to grow, it has to develop. And I think staying in the game with that body of work, continuing to kind of protect it, I think that was always my agenda. Let me protect it, make sure that it's preserved, that it's not just spewed out there in sort of average ways. You know what I mean?
I mean, it seems like these days, you know, Instagram is just a wild, wild west. Like, once you put it out there, it kind of, at least there's this perception that it belongs to the world. You know?
Oh, of course. Well, I like it. And so I'm going to paint it and then I'm going to sell the painting.
Yeah.
I mean, like every single photographer, you know, this happens to us all the time. For me, probably once a week, you know, and then there's certain people that you're just like, hey man, let me have this conversation with you. Like, it's now become, I'm sort of like mentoring a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, this is a lesson that I want to give, you know, or at least a perspective that I want you to consider about taking exactly my work and making my work. I've made my work. What's your voice? Yeah. Go shoot your own reference photo of Busta Rhymes and then deliver that to the world. You know, like those are the conversations that I want to have. I want people to feel great and whole, but man, I'd love to make some money. I'd love to actually, you know, just be able to kind of breathe and finally
have passive income off
not have
all the
like
work
the grind of me rolling around on the ground, ruining outfit after outfit in the hood to make someone else look good for a small fee that somehow, like, you know, endlessly comes back to life. Like, you know, these images are forever and ever.
Yeah. But taking them is weird. Photography is such a strange, it's amalgam because it's like a craft, an art, and a trade all kind of rolled in one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure. But I think our job now is to showcase the work in the way that sort of Avedon did, right? Like that should be now the template. Like, you know, I went into that show and saw images that I'd never seen before. And I worked with him for a year, and I deeply went through his archives. Like I've seen every frame of the American West, the whole project, not the book, but everything, because I just sat and I just absorbed, you know, like I wanted to just sponge everything that I possibly could. And I still went to the show, and there's images that are like, I've never even seen. I never knew that existed. Like, what a phenomenal picture.
Well, it was an interesting show too, because it was curated by 100 people instead of like normally you would see either an extremely broad spectrum of his work, like a kind of career retrospective, or you would have something very specific. But that one was like, you saw very personal photos of people that they chose of themselves that you probably would never have seen exhibited before, you know?
Right. I mean, the picture that Naomi picked was actually, it's one of my greatest like,
she had like
joys
sand?
in my life.
Was it?
She
What
had
was her
sand. It was for the Pirelli calendar, and it represented the different seasons. She was like, you know, the hot summer, and she rolled around in the sand at my feet. So my feet were looking down at her feet, and then her body going away from me. And when it was time to pick her up, she looked me dead in my eyes and put her arms out to me like this. I was like, oh man.
Those moments.
Come on, man. I mean, we just got to take a second though. 22-year-old kid, maybe 23, beautiful Naomi Campbell laying out in front of me, like me being like respectful and composed with like 50 sets of eyes on me, including, you know, like all the power players of the fashion industry at the time. Just kind of like look up and you're like, this is my life. This is what I get to do. This is what the gift is. Just like the biggest goofy grin on my face. And then respectfully, you know, brought her up, walked back into my dark room and loaded 8x10 film. But, you know, like those are the life highlights. They're the little moments that allow you to keep going, to realize that there are special interactions that happen.
You obviously have a really close working relationship with a handful of artists that you've shot with consistently over a long period of time. And we've worked a lot with the same ones. Like I went on tour with Outkast several times, and I was personal photographer to Sean Combs on and off for years and years.
Great.
Spent a lot of time with Naomi over the years.
Yeah, I bet.
But, you know, for me personally, I'm a little bit more reclusive. And I always felt that once I took my camera out of the equation, that it seemed really awkward for me to have the main component of our relationship missing. And, you know, and I'm curious, like, what your relationship off camera with a lot of these people are. I mean, did you find that did you socialize with them on a personal level, or have you always been more comfortable performing a specific role as a photographer and then kind of leaving it at that?
You said that when you I just want to clarify one thing. You said when you put your camera away, you felt somehow not as like connected to the moment. Like, how would you describe what you felt was lacking in the relationship when the camera was put away?
I felt the whole context and purpose for me being in that situation, the way that we related, the reason that we had a connection in the first place was the dynamic of me using this device to capture or to create something. And, and once I took that out, it's like, I'm not trying to be friends with the celebrity. Like they've got their own friends. Like that's not what I want out of the situation, you know?
Yeah. I think that it depends on the artist. Certainly there are artists that you go in and you're friendly in that moment and you create, and it's a meaningful experience, but it is a professional relationship, you know? And I think, you know, I always want people to enjoy themselves. I would love to be remembered as like a really good guy, deeply passionate about what I make, and like just a decent human being walking with integrity that like you enjoyed time with, right? So whether that makes us friends, you know, like, you know, it would be hard to call any of these artists sort of like my dearest best friend. I mean, there's a few, you know, like Rupee, my friend from Barbados, or like The Game, who I call and chat with. But like, we're not calling each other to go to the movies or dinner or whatever. It's like, maybe if I'm in town, like, hey man, what are you doing? Like, you want to grab a drink? I'm going over to the spot. Or you bump into somebody and you have these moments of memories. It's reliving little memories through the touch points of the interactions. But I would say it's the same way. You are there for a role, you know, and there must at some level be an appreciation for that work that was done, especially early on.
From them, you mean?
I would think so, because there is an agenda of spreading the message of who they are to the world.
Of course.
And the people that do it really well, like yourself, like me, like Danny, like so many other amazing voices, you know, even from this new generation that are really putting in the work, you know, they're to be commended, man, and really respected and appreciated. So, you know, I know that there are deeper relationships that photographers have with artists, but, you know.
But it's weird to paint it in the context of a deep relationship or not. Because, I mean, in some ways, like, I have a very deep relationship with Puff. I mean, the experiences that we have shared together and the things that I got to capture, no one's ever seen. Like, incredibly intimate, from like weapons trials, birth of his kid. I mean, like, insane stuff. But the fact that I don't hang out and drink champagne with him socially is just, that's not my role. That's not what I'm there for.
Well, you got the sad Marilyn moments. You know what I mean? Him in the limelight is a very different Puff. You know, like, so look, I look at it as, you know, just a real privilege. I mean, there are life experiences that make you understand maybe how difficult it is to be an artist like that and to keep it moving and keep it, you know, real and somehow grounded in something that's meaningful as they whip through this industry that can be really hollow and vapid and, you know, crazy in some ways. Like, I mean, I guess you got to feel the real moments.
I mean,
like,
I guess what I'm saying, it was always more important for me to get the picture. It would go picture and then experience. Like, an experience, and a great experience is,
well, they happen simultaneously.
Great. Correct. But that's what I'm saying. If I take the camera out of the situation and I'm just having an experience or a story, like, I'm not interested. I want either the picture
is
or
it
just
because you don't have the role? Like, the way that you had an experience with him, would it be an equal experience from him to you? Or was that just getting it done on that day? And look, I ask it of myself as well. Like, do people really deeply appreciate the images that I created for them in any given moment? Like, I don't know where I stand with a lot of people. You know what I mean? In some ways. And then some people clarify it like, no, man, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, I love what we made. And like, this is my personal, to look back at who I was in that moment without you, it wouldn't exist in the same way. It would be different. Like, what you did for me catapulted me. Some people can acknowledge, and then some people, I don't know that they're built to see anything but themselves.
I think he does appreciate that. And I think he had the vision to bring, whether it was me or somebody, into that role. And this is way before social media. This is way before digital photography. And like, nobody, you know, now everybody has their homeboy that's like with a camera shooting everything. This is before that, you know?
Well, he's a thinking human being. I mean, God bless Puff for, one, his longevity, his vision, his dedication. He knew what he wanted. He chased it, got it, went after it. Like, he has the foresight and understanding of what it is to market well, right? And to document the moments. You know, he studied the masters of like the Rat Pack and like what they did. Like, okay, I'm going to do a parallel version. You got to like get all of these moments.
Muhammad Ali.
When I look back, Ali, perfect example. Like Neil Leifer, Howard Bingham, who shot Ali. Like, there are templates of how this works really well, you know, and that access isn't given to everybody. You know, like, so, I mean, it's a real privilege to be in these rooms and to document these things through any photographer's, you know, unique vision. Yeah. Especially when they're talented, because the images are inspiring not only to the artist in the frame, like, wow, what a night. Like, that's one in my record book of like, amazing, you know, on a boat with Naomi and somebody, and, you know. Like,
but I mean, I think that I did respect that privilege. And I think that was my way of showing respect to that privilege of being like, I'm either here to do my job, which you obviously think I do well or I wouldn't be here.
Right.
Or just take the white noise out of the situation. You don't need another me hanging out, like trying to make you laugh or whatever. I mean, that was my approach. You know?
No, look, I had that even on set. It's like, what am I going to tell this guy that he hasn't heard before? I'm going to do my work. Yeah, that's what's going to count in the end and what's going to mean something to his fans and his people that he's speaking to, you know, but also to him, you know, but like, make it a pleasant moment. But, you know, I found I talked less in rooms where there were really powerhouse artists that I deeply respected. You do your job, I do my job.
And we're going to make something great together.
Fucking amazing.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, we always like to end this podcast by asking the guests to plug something that they're not directly involved in, that they feel isn't getting enough attention, whether it's a book, a movie, an artist, a photographer, a social cause. Like, is there anything that you've been really feeling lately that you want to shout out and give a little shine to?
Big up to all moms out there, you know, that are looking after their kids like in a beautiful way and raising this next soulful generation. Just big up moms out there rocking, you know. Anyway, I digress. I think since we're talking about photography, like, I'll big up Mel D. Cole in this moment. His coverage of a lot of the
his January 6th stuff is,
man. I mean, just his unique perspective on allowing each side to have a voice. The coverage, you know, it wasn't like I'm just standing with one voice. Like the fact that he kind of went in unbiased and covered. I'll big him up individually. Danny Clinch for his longevity. Lynn Goldsmith for fighting the good fight with the Warhol estate, you know, who certainly big respect to Warhol and the work that he created. But like, you know, the work that we make is special, unique, fine art, straight out the gate. Once we make it, once we take that shutter, snap it and deliver that to the world, that's our art. So like, don't copy our art, go make your own art, right, you know? Well, I don't know. That would be, I don't know who I plugged right there.
That's good. Well, let's
moms
end it.
And photographers.
Let's end it on that. Moms
Big
and
up.
photographer.
Big up every time.
Jonathan, it's been such a pleasure, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down.
Thank you for having
really,
me.
you know, I've been following your career for quite some time. We've kind of had some like, you know, parallel overlaps over the years, but, you know, I dig what you do and I appreciate you sitting down.
Oh, man. It has been a total joy. I love to tell the stories, you know, and I think that the more we do this and the more we can deliver to the world that's of substance and of meaning. People are seeking answers deeply in this moment, in a moment when a lot of stuff comes at you quick. You're like, to be able to settle down, listen to each of our perspectives and what you do with, you know, Tinker Hatfield and the other brilliant guests that you've had on, man. I mean, like you're selecting people who work with passion. And I think it's phenomenal that you amplify people in that way selflessly and allow some of the shine to come to others, man. So
cheers.
Salute you as well.
Right on, man.
Love.
Thanks for listening, and a huge thanks to today's guest for dropping in. If you enjoyed this episode, do us a favor and take a minute to rate, review, follow, or subscribe. This episode of The Plug was executive produced by Peter Buckingham with original theme music by Andrew Van Weingarten and Dan Drohan. Logo design and branding by Italic at www.italic-studio.com. Sound design by Brad Worrell at Soundwag, and you can check out my photography at justinj.com. Thanks again, and be sure to tune in for future conversations.